He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is the Alex Marlow Show.
All right, Hawaiian Shirt Friday on the Alex Marlow Show. Thanks for joining me. It's kind of going to turn to a weekend show. We're off to a later start. I'm trying to rest up a little bit so that I can get through the show. You know, I haven't done a fill-in before, and today would be a day where normally I would, just because I feel good today, actually, but just I sound a little bit like a 80-year-old chain smoker today. So if any of you are offended by that, then thanks for being with me. I appreciate it. A good week of shows. If you want some weekend content, I would recommend my interview with Dr. Gorka, where he tells a lot of stories from inside the White House. Also, yesterday, where I had my interview with Josh Hawley, and then followed that up with my speech to Empower You, which was my sort of state of the media landscape, which is one of my areas of expertise. As you know, I look towards the future, towards AI. I also give some great history of my background with Andrew Breitbart. So all that's in the last couple of shows. We have some good guests lined up for next week. I won't tease them yet because sometimes guests flake. And so whenever I tease them, I feel like I'm inviting them to flake. But we got some good stuff lined up on the show coming up. I will start with a little more fleshed out version of my take on the Pope. At this point, you've gotten everyone's take, I assume. But mine is, first of all, I'm going to let the Pope be the Pope before I fully take a side. I know that the Everything app, the people I tend to follow, have already written him off as a globalist and as a Marxist. And I think that there is some contrarian pushback that he might actually be a terrific Pope. In the end, I will give you just sort of my Ben Franklin list so far. So in the positive category, I like that he's an American. And I think that is offset in terms of this stigma against Americans for the global community, and that he spent a lot of time in Peru, 2 decades. His mother's name was Martinez. So I think a lot of Latin America is very excited about the prospect of him being a Latin American Pope, because actually St. Francis, even though he's from Argentina, did not have a deep connection, it seemed in the end, to Latin America. So I think that's all positive. He's multilingual. I think that's a very good look. It's an intellectual look, and I think that it helps reach more people. So he speaks Italian, he speaks Latin, he speaks Spanish, he speaks American, or English, if you want to call it that. I think that's very cool. His pro-life bona fides seem to be pristine. Seems like a lifelong fighter for pro-life issues, and he has been very solid on the gender issues. All that really positive. And he's a populist, which overall I like, but that's a good way to dovetail into negatives. And then I don't think you can do populism without nationalism. And I'm definitely not seeing the nationalism. I'm seeing globalism, and a populist globalist. I don't know how that's going to go, because Pope Francis, of course, was deeply open borders and would do stuff that was almost shtick, where he did the cross-border mass during Trump's first administration, where he had a mass that was starting in Mexico but actually bled into America to try to be an anti-borders guy. And this is where I'm going to be watching very closely, because with the new Pope, Pope Leo, he is if he takes an approach, he is there's been a lot of discussion of him suggesting that it's imperative for Americans to treat illegal aliens with dignity. And I think that we do that. And I hope he understands that. And it seems like his criticism, which is surfaced on the X platform, of us not treating people with dignity, I'm hoping that is something that he understands, that we treat illegal aliens with more dignity than anyone else. I know of late, Trump has made an example of a few of them, usually the bad guys, but overall, we are a people that treat illegal aliens very well. For example, if you're an illegal alien and you come into this country, then you are very likely to have your children get the same education as my children get. You're likely to get health care from people like my wife, who studied at elite American institutions and dedicated her life to practice of medicine. If you show up, you will get treatment from her. And that's one of those things where when she worked at the county hospital, that was the system. The way it worked is you don't ask people's immigration status. You don't ask for their papers. You show up and then you get the care. So that's a very dignified approach. And it is one of these things where I just hope that we are, he gives us enough credit for that, because he spent a lot of time in Peru, spent a lot of time in the Vatican where he was in charge of picking bishops. So if there's some daylight there between the reality that America does tend to treat illegal aliens with incredible dignity, and any sort of rhetorical criticism that might come from conservatives who are trying to get the policies fixed, that's going to be a problem. So he comes from one of the things that a lot of people have talked about is he's an Augustinian, and Augustinians tend to have a real community-based approach to the church, which could potentially be a negative in the sense that it could be less focus on tradition, less focus on rigidity. And I think the church benefits from more tradition, more rigidity. I think especially at this moment where people have moved away from God, people have found these false gods and things like wokeism and climate change and Marxism and just the self, the obsession with the self, which we have, which has been indulged by our social media platforms, where every other post is about just the self. It's not about your spiritual life. It's about what to do to help yourself have a better self. And all of that, I think, is really incongruous with traditional teachings of the church. And this is where the church can provide a really big ballast against that. So it is, and I'll tell you, the first homily, which was this morning, which I watched before the show, it was really focused on the concept of Jesus being a part of the Holy Trinity. And that being, if Jesus was not part of the Holy Trinity, then why are we here? What is this all about? There's a big disconnect. I kind of love that because it was it was a challenge to people to take their faith to the next level. And I like that, to not just think Jesus was, as Francis Martel put it to me, a cool guy, that he actually was God, the Son of God, one with God. And the essence of that is being a part of the Catholic faith. I like that. I like that language. And it was delivered pretty poetically. So it was good. It was good stuff. It was a good start. Stuff I don't dig. I think he's going to be a climate change guy. He's echoed Pope Francis' sentiment that climate change is centralized to the church. That's, of course, bogus, and I hope that goes away. He's used Twitter to criticize conservative policies, but support stuff like pro-life causes, but criticizing like J.D. Vance, for example, over immigration. Obviously, I dislike that. That should go without saying that I don't like that, and it rubs me the wrong way. He also was a part of the group that enforced the removal of the former Bishop Strickland of Texas, who was an outspoken conservative and was someone who had a big fan base in conservative America, and Pope Francis removed him, and part of the group that it was Francis's decision, but it was the group, the Pope Leo as cardinal was a part of this, part of the discussions, and that, of course, makes me skeptical as well. I don't know how much of that to blame on him, but I know that he certainly didn't stop Pope Francis from doing that, and that was another not great moment. So there's some unknown stuff that I'm watching as well. China. So will he attack communism? Will he cozy up to dictators? Will he do political stunts? Will he call out Marxism? I don't know. And that's stuff that we don't know. So he's silent on China. And I talked to Francis Martel about this on our Breitbart Fight Club show, Breitbart Confidential. And so what does that mean? And the point I made is that if you're in Hollywood and you're silent on politics, then we know you're probably conservative, because you get more credibility, you get better cocktail party invites if you come out and speak the left-wing party line. But what do we read into his silence on China? Does it mean maybe he's okay with China's human rights abuses? Maybe he's okay with their concentration camps. Maybe he's okay with their organ harvesting. Maybe he's okay with their repression. Or maybe not. Maybe he's silent on China because he doesn't like all that stuff, and he feels like there's only so much good he could do, so much headway he could make with the current papacy with Pope Francis. So again, Pope Leo's allies framed him as a moderate alternative to Francis, where we were going to probably get a continuation of a lot of Francis's values, given the nature of the College of Cardinals and how 80% of them were chosen by Francis, that he could be a guy that could perhaps bridge some of the gaps between the more traditionally minded Catholics and the more, I would say, progressives like Pope Francis. So anyway, so where does that leave us? I will say my expectations are fairly low. I will admit. So if you've been on the X the Everything app and you've been reading all this negative stuff, I'm not quite as negative as some of the strongest voices on that platform, because I think there's enough reason to be positive in certain ways, enough reasons to be hopeful. But there certainly is not a lot of great indications that we are in for a Pope Benedict or a Pope John Paul II. But that said, as I said on yesterday's show, and I'll say it again, I think most of us kind of guessed wrong on Pope Francis. We thought, I think my quote was, he was going to be a badass with a heart of gold. He turned out to be just this almost like a performance artist in a lot of ways, moving the church in a progressive way, deeply political, and a Marxist. And that was not great. So I'm hoping that we get the best case scenario of that. And as I said, I'll pray for the new Pope. And there's a lot of potential here, but again, let's be very cautious going into it. I would not, but let's let him be Pope for a while before we form a complete judgment. I mentioned Vance. I got to throw one thing out there, that he had a great quote, which is, he said that India and Pakistan fighting is none of our business in America. And I really thought about this. This is some real 3D chess here that Vance is playing, because remember, Vance's wife is Indian. Vance just went to India and had a great trip with his family and was at the Taj Mahal, and he was taking all these great photos. And Francis Martel again pointed this out to me, that India's army relative to Pakistan is much stronger. So if there's a conflict between India and Pakistan, then India is almost certainly going to win. So by Vance saying we're neutral is in a way passively, indirectly pro-India. And I thought that's kind of a brilliant positioning by Vance, because Vance, who is almost pacifist in his, he's in the no, not only is he in the no stupid wars camp, he's kind of in the no wars at all camp. And I'm sure he'd push back on that if he was here a little bit, but that's kind of where he's coming from. And I thought it was noteworthy that he took this line that looked very consistent with his no wars approach, but it ends up coming out as lightly, indirectly pro-India. And I thought that was very clever. And that's why these guys are smart and they're in the roles they're in. You know as well as I do that the legacy media is broken. For decades, big cable filtered information to hide the truth from Americans. It's no small reason why trust in mass media has hit historic lows. But thanks to outlets like Breitbart, the truth can break through, providing facts and voices legacy outlets block from the airwaves. But big cable still has the ability to control access to information you want. They do it by limiting access to something called spectrum, the invisible airwaves that power affordable wireless internet, and by forcing you into their bundles, keeping independent media out of reach. Leaders in Congress like Ted Cruz are working with President Trump to expand spectrum access for more Americans. Our president offered additional access in his first term, and he can raise $100 billion now by doing it again. And conservatives like Stephen Moore argue it's a perfect fit for the current economic plans. Call your legislator now and tell them to expand spectrum access today if you dig what these guys are saying, so more Americans can read the news in independent outlets like this one. You could also learn more at endthecableopoly.org. That's endthecableopoly.org. Okay, let's get into next thing on my list is a disappointment again. Ed Martin is out. They're moving him on to a different role. Trump has put forward Judge Jeanine Pirro in his place. At this point, you guys have had the takes on it, but I do want to play the video. If you guys have not seen the video, those of you who are watching on the streams, I do recommend you subscribe on YouTube and Rumble. You get the visual elements of the show. You get to see my cool Hawaiian shirt. I'm having a good hair day today. Let's see how it translates, but I think it's good. So all that's up there for you. I want to play this video of Ed Martin. Where is this? Okay, so this is what happens. He's doing an interview with Newsmax on the street in D.C. Check this out.
So we need to get really focused.
Who the fuck are you? You are Martin.
How you doing? Whoa.
You are.
So he gets spat on in the middle of an interview by an angry leftist. It's important to play these things because we know if you're watching a show like this, you're listening to a show like this, you're aware the left is this violent streak. They have this inability to be good, behave well. If this woman's a Christian, be a good Christian. and uphold those values, be that city on a hill. They have no intention to do any of that. They think that political victory matters more than anything, and they just want to shame you and they want to make your life miserable just for standing for different things than they do. So it was a shame that Tom Tillis gave them that scalp. And I'm sure Tillis was representing other elements of the Republican establishment, but Tom Tillis basically saying, I'm not going to vote for him because of January the 6th, and thus we have to move on. So we'll see what happens with Judge Jeanine from Fox News, and everyone likes Judge Jeanine. I have nothing negative to say, but we'll see if we run into the same issue, if they come up with some reason for her not to get that role. And I think Ed would have been terrific at it. And Trump's moved him on to something else, and I forget what it is, but I'm sure it's another good job. But overall, we'll try to talk to Ed next week. As you guys know, I know Ed. We're friendly, and but I don't like giving out scalps right now. It's a shame. And Tom Tillis was the guy. He put his hand up and said, I'm the one who's killing it. And so North Carolina, take note, because he does not get it. He does not get what's necessary to beat the left. It is a 24-hour war footing right now in order to be successful in this regard. So that is bad news, but we will move forward, and hopefully Judge Jeanine will do a good job. Other things big, UK trade deal underway. So the White House has said that it's going to open up $5 billion in new market access for the U.S. in the UK. More details to come. It's noteworthy with the trade stuff because keeping some of the deal details secret is imperative for a good negotiation. Scott Bessent talks about this a little bit in a Capitol Hill hearing. Let me play a little bit of this.
Specifically, which countries are you close to striking deals with?
I'm sorry, Congresswoman, but that would not benefit the United States.
No. I'm asking you a question based on the statement that you made on CNBC.
And I am telling you that it would be detrimental to the interest of the United States for me to answer that question.
Why will that be detrimental?
Because as the negotiations may still be in process as we speak, as we are not at the end of the week yet, I am sure that you through your question, would not want to compromise the U.S. negotiations.
Reclaiming my time.
Would you?
Secretary Bessent, the president goes into a press conference and claims that there are negotiations going on. And then the next day, there's no negotiations going on. So why would you not answer my question? And that will be considered detrimental to the American people, to the American economy. I do not understand.
So,
despite your claim...
So this is Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez from New York, and she would much rather see the Trump administration fail than to see deals get done. This is just the Capitol Hill performance art, why I don't always play clips from these hearings, because they're just designed to grandstand. Not much gets done. They're very enjoyable from a spectator sport perspective, but not a lot gets accomplished here. She's just trying to undermine deals. That's where this goes. This continued with other questions, and Bessent, his presence is so great because he's used to arguing with idiots. Remember, he was a professor, I think it was at Yale, and so he taught people who think they're smart and aren't, and so he knows exactly how to deal with them, which is one of my favorite characteristics of him. This comes up here. Let me check out this clip for you.
4 decades, Congress. They missed it. Who was the president?
Gregory Meeks of New York.
And who has been the president since January 20th, 2025?
Donald J. Trump.
Okay. And who was the president in 2024?
One believes President Biden.
One believes.
You guys got that? One believes President Biden, and you see it. If you see where I pause on the screen, Bessent's smiling. Like he knows he got off a good one here, which is really fun.
In 2024.
One believes President Biden.
One believes? You one of those non-believers that the election, the American people didn't vote?
I am not.
He gave it a nice pause. I am not. There's so many ways to answer that question. You could say that, well, we haven't figured out the auto pen stuff, and I don't know. It just kind of felt like some days he wasn't around. He was in cognitive decline, as you all heard recently.
You're not? You said one believes? Do you believe in the Constitution of the United States? And it should be abided by?
I believe in the Constitution of the United States.
So you believe in it without any second thought. You don't have to think about it. You believe in it, and you would abide by it. Is that correct?
I have and I do, sir.
Okay. Well, do you know that a president has said he may or may not? He don't know? Let me ask this question. I couldn't believe.
Yeah, so Meeks did not have a good retort. He knew he had an opportunity to say something smart there, but he didn't have it. That was great. So anyway, so that's the negotiations are taking place, and I think there's some real potential here to see some movement in the next few days. China's the first Chinese tariffs are hitting. So you might see some prices coming up pretty soon of shipping goods that are getting 145% plus tariff arriving at U.S. ports. So that's coming up. Trump has talked about dropping a lot of those to 80%. That could be a good number. So we'll keep you posted. I'm sure we'll have a lot more updates. So, but we're already seeing a lot of benefit from the reshoring and the threat that Trump's tariffs send to the world. For example, CEO Mark Baracus of Shark Ninja. You guys might not be familiar with Shark Ninja, but it's a super cool company. They have these vacuum cleaners that are a good alternative to Dyson, which is the very expensive vacuum brand. And they have the best, I think, air fryers. I know we have an air fryer from this company. We get a vacuum from this company. And what I didn't know is that 100% of their products were made in China. But by the end of the second quarter, he says nearly 90% will be produced outside of China. So even if all the jobs aren't reshored, they're going to go away from China. It weakens China. Everything's about China. And this is a massive accomplishment from Trump. One thing I'm more skeptical of on the economic front from hearing from Trump is we're talking about a tax hike on the rich, saying that the Republicans should probably not do it. He caveated it. But I'm not a tax hike guy. I'm not pro-tax hike. I don't ever want to see tax hikes, even on the rich. I just don't think that it offsets the message that the government is entitled to more of your money and you get more of a penalty the more money you make. I think that message is not offset by the benefit it is to our Treasury. I don't think our Treasury is entitled to any more than it gets. And so I'm a tax cut guy all the time. I'm never a tax hike guy. So, but I know there's a lot of people in Trump's base who would like to see a tax hike on the richest people. I'm not necessarily in that group. And it would be interesting to see where the left shakes out on some of these, because some of them are in that group. You know, we talked about Nancy Pelosi with Josh Hawley yesterday. Bernie Sanders certainly is in that group. And Bret Baier was calling out some of his hypocrisy this week. It was pretty funny. Let me play this.
You know, Alyssa Slotkin, senator from Michigan, she said you shouldn't be using oligarch. It's over people's head. You've gotten criticized from other people. Free Beacon says Bernie Sanders spent $221,000 on private jets fighting the oligarchy tour, paid for by friends of Bernie Sanders. That you've spent millions of dollars in campaign funds on private jet travel over the years. How do you push back on both of those things?
When's the last time you saw Donald Trump during a campaign mode at National Airport?
No, it doesn't. But he's also not fighting the oligarchy.
No. When you run a campaign and you do 3 or 4 or 5 rallies in a week, the only way you can get around to talk to 30,000 people. Think I'm going to...
You know what I like about this? There's something interesting, just as putting myself in Baier's shoes. He doesn't have to say anything, and he looks like a genius here, because Sanders just sounds so insane. Baier could explain to Sanders that this is a logical fallacy. It's a total non sequitur. It's not. Donald Trump does not purport to be someone who is fighting the elite. That's not what he's the moneyed class. He's not someone who's preaching socialism as an actual socialist. But he can just sit there and just watch Sanders make a fool of himself. But of course, Sanders should be on should not be on private planes. He should be going to the normal airport and standing in security lines if he's really serious about fighting the oligarchy.
And be sitting on a waiting line at United, waiting, 30,000 oligarchy. No. When you run a campaign and you do 3 or 4 or 5 rallies in a week, the only way you can get around to talk to 30,000 people. Think I'm going to be sitting on a waiting line at United, waiting, 30,000 people are waiting. That's the only way you can get around. No apologies for that. That's what campaign travel is about. We've done it in the past. We're going to do it in the future.
And you think?
So he belittles people who stand in line to use a United plane, those who can't have a private jet, as if his job is so much more important. Do you think every person who's on a United airline flight has to sit in TSA and wait in tarmacs when their gate's not open at LAX? Do you think all those people's jobs are less important than Bernie Sanders? No, he thinks he's saving the world by giving these speeches when they're completely out of power and they're powerless. And they're just fighting for their own the ego and self-aggrandizement. There's something also, if he said, I would like to do 4 rallies a week, but I'm only going to do 3 because I need to spend some time at the airport in line because I don't want to use a private jet. I think that that's the sort of thing that would be rewarded. I think that's the sort of thing that would make him actually more popular, and perhaps more people show up at the 3 rallies because he's more pure of heart. I've got a perfect analogy of this, and it's Chick-fil-A. Do you guys think Chick-fil-A would make more or less money if they opened on Sundays? I think they'd make less, because I think that signal to Christians that we keep holy the Sabbath every Sunday, I think that made their brand so much more popular. I think they made up the extra 6 of revenue with that move, which is it was just great strategy. I don't know if it was always meant to be that way. I'm not trying to read intentions, but that's how it worked out. I think if Sanders skipped one of the 4 rallies because he did not want to do what oligarchs do, which is take private planes, I think he'd get rewarded. But he's either a fool or just a liar.
You think that this is hitting a mark? You think it's scratching the itch that voters want to hear from?
I think at a time when the people on top are doing phenomenally well, when seniors, working class people are struggling, people want to hear action to stand up to the people who have the wealth and the power and create an economy that works for all of us, not just the people on top.
Well, Senator Sanders, I appreciate you coming on, talking about the issues, and we'll have you back.
Thank you very much, Brett.
Thank you. Up next,
it must be surreal. I would love to interview him. It must be surreal. Is there someone who's more at the top than Bernie Sanders? The guy is the epitome of wealth and power. Really awesome stuff. All right. It did make me think of other things that the left is doing right now. We've got, where is this clip? Oh yeah, this is Congressman McBride, who impersonates a woman. I want to check in with him because remember, Sanders is acting like we need to only be defending the normal people's pocketbooks right now. Here's what others in the Democrat Party are doing.
We are on our way to the House floor to vote on what is possibly the dumbest bill we could be spending our time on, legislation to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. This is ridiculous. And look, you might think that we're doing this because it's another opportunity for House Republicans to be sycophantic to the man in the White House. But the other reason why we're doing this is, despite how unpopular this name change is, they would rather us be talking about nixing the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay, so this is a person who changed their gender from male to female, allegedly, and changed his name from, I think it was Scott to Sarah. So the guy born as Scott McBride and then changed name to Sarah McBride. Can you even find this on like Wikipedia if what their name was? What was Sarah McBride's first name? I don't know because I think that's because that's dead naming. So I don't think you can even put that on like a Wikipedia for a quick search. But there's a guy who changes gender in his name and is saying we can't change Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. Why? Why can't we? Of course we can.
The Gulf of Mexico, rather than talking about how House Republicans are trying to nix healthcare for millions of Americans. They would rather us talk about the Gulf of Mexico than talk about how Donald Trump's reckless and erratic tariff policy is crashing the economy. Changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico in this economy? What the hell are we doing?
Yeah, he's just trying to pander to online people, but it's the economic argument has nothing to do with anything. It's a total non sequitur. They just use every logical fallacy in the book. I'm just going to print out a list of all their rhetoric. It's all logically fallacious. It has nothing to do with the economy, changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico. They're just not related. We can call Gulf of America and grow the economy. We could also leave it as Gulf of Mexico and ruin the economy like Joe Biden. So Joe Biden was ruining the economy. Joe Biden's been out there, by the way. One more on the trans stuff. A couple of cities have taken to, I guess, Salt Lake City. And I think there's one other one. There are a couple of cities now who are changing their flags to the trans flag. So in order to make sure they can display the trans flag, we call it the groomer flag because we all know that what this flag is about is we were very content to respect gay people and gays' rights to exist and be treated with dignity for a long time. And then all of a sudden we ended up having to trans the kids in the classroom. We got there very fast, and they're not related. I mean, Scott Bessent in a gay man has nothing to do with all this trans grooming that we're seeing in the schools amongst the kids. And this has been an excuse to radicalize all of us. So anyway, these cities are trying to bring the trans flag back from some sort of trans flag bans that have been going on. So check this out.
I want each and every resident to look up at any flag that flies at City Hall and be reminded that their community values belonging and acceptance, and that their community values every one of them. Let the Sago Lily send a simple but powerful message. Salt Lake City is here for you. We believe in you, and we love you.
Yeah, so it's all chaos and pandering, and they don't know what to do, so they feel like this is doing something. But the state had banned in Utah, they'd banned trans flags in public display. So they made the official flag the trans flag, and that's how they think they can get around it. So that's where they're taking their time. How do they have time to do this when they should be focused on the economy? How do they have time to do the trans flag? See, that's the logic, right? It's the logic to use. Okay, Joe Biden was out there doing an interview with BBC. I think this makes sense for him. He's always thought of himself as an international guy. He's thought of himself as a foreign policy dynamo. I read all of his books. He's got a book deal allegedly that's being discussed for $30 million. Joe Biden, in order to make that would mean he'd have to sell somewhere in the vicinity of 6 or 8 million books. Joe Biden's books in the past, I bet he hasn't written a book that's cracked 100,000 sales. So if he calls out some big people, maybe he'll sell a couple million books. Like maybe, I doubt it. I bet he sells far fewer than that. But this is very corrupt if he gets $30 million. This is a handout, a kickback of some kind, because there's no way he will have a book that's worth $30 million. So that's being discussed. It might be a 2-book thing with him and Jill, but either way, that is not logical. It doesn't make sense. There's just not going to be that many book sales. So we got to get to the bottom of what grift's taking place. There's going to be some for sure. But he went to the BBC for his first major interview since, I guess, Trump took office, or first or second. It makes sense because he likes the international thing, and he gets to complain about Trump overseas, which is something that I think is beneath the president, but I think it's important to Biden to do that. We got a couple of tastes of it. Let me play some for you.
What did you make of those scenes in the Oval Office? President Trump and President Zelensky.
I found it sort of beneath America, the way that took place, and the way...
I will say this calmly because I've made this point so often, but this is an outrage. It's an outrageous thing for the president of the United States, the former president, to undermine the leader of the free world, the president of the United States, to an overseas outlet. That is not something that's appropriate. He should be forever a cheerleader for the country that he was the leader. And I think that if he believes this sentiment, he needs to figure out a way to vocalize it to President Trump on a private level. You don't do this publicly because it undermines the whole country, and it allows for the bad guys around the world, our adversaries, to take this line and to attack Trump with it and thus attack our country. So that should be fundamental. Obviously, Joe Biden doesn't agree, but just know that that is an outrageous thing to say.
We talk about now that, it's the Gulf of America. Maybe we're going to have to take back Panama. Maybe we need to acquire Greenland. Maybe Canada should be. What the hell's going on here? What president ever talks like that? That's not who we are. We're about freedom, democracy, opportunity, not about confiscation.
Yeah, this is all just... he's not offering a rationale, a basis, a logical argument for why we don't want to take Panama Canal back, which has been taken over by Chinese companies after Americans suffered and died to build it. There's no reason why we want Greenland to just, China's encroaching in the Arctic. Denmark is not doing all they can with Greenland. Why can't we try to take it back? The Canada stuff's somewhat of a troll, but it puts people on notice. It's effective in a lot of ways. So he's being deliberately obtuse to undermine Trump to an overseas outlet. Not good. All right, here he is talking about Ukraine and Russia.
The idea that they could win without engaging NATO in a war, and NATO having engaged the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, Russia, is not likely. We gave them everything they needed to provide for their independence, and we were prepared to respond more aggressively if, in fact, Putin moved again. But we needed to this is a tricky thing. You know, we had Poland now. Poland's, a NATO country. You know, Poland used to be in a situation where it was part of the Warsaw Pact.
I don't think I can bore you guys more.
There's just a lot of change taking place.
He's getting lost. It seems like he's been in cognitive decline, in case you guys haven't heard. But the point here, the first point, which is important, is that Ukraine's not going to win without NATO's help, and NATO's not going to help him because Trump won, and we're not going to allow for that to happen. Biden administration would have liked for it to happen. They couldn't pull it off, I don't think, politically, and now we're in the spot we're in now. Let's play some more.
It's a frightening time. Now, I can tell how angry you are, I think, with some of the things that your successor with Donald Trump has been saying and doing. You say it's not who we are, it's not America. The other day you said in a speech, nobody is king. Do you think he's behaving more like a monarch than a president?
Oh, I'd rather not comment. I'm not sure how he's behaving. He's not behaving like a Republican president.
What does that mean?
You're being diplomatic, sir.
Oh, hilarious.
What do you say about his 100 days? Now, he says, look at all these things I've achieved. I've closed the border. I've started to bring jobs back to the United States. I'm cutting government waste.
Those are good accomplishments, right? Closing the border, cutting government waste, bringing jobs back.
He says he's delivering what people voted for.
Let me tell you, when I left office, we had created more jobs than any president in the history of the United States in one term. Our economy was roaring. We're moving in a direction where the stock market was way up. So see how he's just saving face. He doesn't have a real argument against stuff Trump is doing. So he's just trying to talk about his own legacy. Here we go, a little bit more. And the way we talk about now that, it's just the Gulf of America. Maybe we're going to have to take back Panama. Maybe we need to acquire Greenland. Maybe Canada should be. What the hell's going on here? What president ever talks like that? That's not who we are. We're about freedom, democracy, opportunity, not about confiscation.
So no one's talking about confiscating anything, and we are, I don't know what democracy has to do with the Gulf of America. It just, they only have non sequiturs. They don't have real arguments. So that's why I play this to show you that have no fear. We've got time. They have not built up any sort of meaningful resistance. I've got a little more. This is still pretty good stuff. So let me keep going.
Look, if you want peace, Ukraine is going to have to give up some territory. Some people think that is common sense to say that. Do you think it's not common sense? It's perhaps modern day appeasement?
It is modern day appeasement. Look, listen to what Putin said when he talked about going from Kyiv into Ukraine. And why? He believes it's part of Mother Russia. He believes it's historical rights to Ukraine. He talks about Eastern Europe. What this man wants to do is reestablish the Warsaw Pact. He can't stand the fact that the Russian dictatorship that he runs, that the Soviet Union has come.
The point here is that Biden is in denial that Russia is going to get the Crimea. And this is something that was taken under Barack Obama's presidency. It was not Trump's problem. And Trump is not going to insist Putin give it back. And Biden has to take this footing that it is about all of Ukraine. And if you give Putin that, then he'll take everything. Well, we're going to have to wait and see on that, because we're not going to return something that Russia took 10 years ago as part of a peace agreement right now. It's just not going to happen. There's no potential for it. And Biden is either lying or being deliberately misleading, or he's in denial about the reality. But he's trying to make it seem like if we give him Crimea, we'll have to give him everything. It's just not true. That's not how it's going to be. And we're going to just have to see how that goes. I like the way the reporter, where I don't know his name, but he phrased it as, it just seems like common sense. It is common sense. And that's what's going to happen. And it's just a matter of time. Mark my words on that. All right. Let me mention a few other items as we round things down. We did an interview with Senator Thune. Matt Boyle did for us at Breitbart News. He talked about staggering successes at the border. They're mind-blowing. Totally true. The border numbers are ridiculously low, and it's a seminal accomplishment by President Trump. But in the meantime, the illegal aliens who are here continue to commit crimes. 3 illegal aliens have been charged with a vicious kidnapping of a North Carolina family. A husband was tied up, and his wife and toddler were kidnapped from the home. All illegal aliens, all were charged federal crime. None of these are necessary. A MS-13 gangbanger called Anti-Cristo was sentenced for machete killings of 4 men in New York in a park. So a guy, Omar Antonio Villalta, received 55 years in prison for his role in killing 4 teens. So I don't know why it's only 55 years. Seems kind of short, with a machete in the middle of a park. So all this violence, all this would be avoidable if we had a border. And in the meantime, you still have some Republicans who are pandering to wokeness. Here is Senator Lakford. Check this out.
What's been confusing on this is some people see due process like as an American citizen. That's a right to a jury trial. That's all those different things. That's not true for due process for someone who's not a citizen of the United States. It's a different process. It's often just literally what people call an immigration judge is not a typical federal judge or a state judge. This is someone that's in the bureaucracy, that their task for DHS is that task on it. So they're a government employee career. That's an immigration judge. So it's a very different process for it. But yes, there's a need to be able to give an opportunity for someone to be able to make an argument before they're removed in the country. It's just. Yeah,
absolutely infuriating stuff from Senator Langford. There is no right to due process for illegal aliens, as I've said over and over again, but it is as important of a point as I can make. If we due process for all 30 million odd illegal aliens, let's say it's 15 million illegal aliens, it would take decades, if not hundreds of years, to adjudicate them all. We cannot do it. So we need to have deportations. And if we know you're a bad guy, if we know you're connected with human smuggling, then you got to go, and you don't need due process. And of course, he's on CNN, so there's not going to be any pushback on there. Other things going on, some international items that are out there. We did a big interview with Steve Witkoff. We'll be rolling out verticals of that over the week. He's talking about an Iran deal. Iran has agreed that they don't want nuclear weapons, according to Witkoff. That is stunning news. An Iran deal that has Iran dismantled their nuclear program is a win. I think that's the number one deal imaginable. If Trump could pull that off, that would be a monumental victory as well. Hopefully the deal gets better from there. But if Witkoff says that's in the bag, then we got high hopes for that. More on that content next week. Recall, I mentioned earlier in the week that AfD, the second biggest party in Germany, Alternative for Deutschland, had been classified as as I guess some sort of a right-wing extremist group, radical terrorist. Oh yeah, confirmed right-wing extremists. That classification is coming off, so the pushback has been effective, and I think that's great. It's a big positive. California, a lot of interesting stuff over there as Gavin Newsom gets ready to run for president. California is facing another budget shortfall, $10 billion to $20 billion. And dozens of Democrats have joined Republicans to repeal Newsom's ban on gas-powered cars. So as I've said, that's going to go away. I predicted it. That ban's supposed to kick in a few years. It's going to go away. It's going to stop. The electric cars are not good enough. And it's just it is too devastating to an economy to axe out that part of the economy, the combustion engine. So there you go. We got that to look forward to. 54% of Californian voters believe that Newsom is too focused on himself. So not something that is impossible to overcome, but it's going to be hard to overcome it for a 2028 run. Again, Democrats still pretty rudderless. There is a new oil refinery. I guess it's a regulation that's been put into place that could accelerate gas prices in California to pass $6 per gallon or even $9 per gallon in a couple years, according to a big local analysis by Phillips 66 refinery in Los Angeles. That was reported on by a USC professor named Michael Misch, noting that we're on a pace in California to see gas prices at that level. I'll tell you, it's bad for me and filling up my Elefante, my giant car, but it could be good for the country if something like that happens, because it could show you that Democrat regulation destroys economies and it destroys lives. And this could be a great signal to the rest of the country if this continues.
We know the economy right now is absolutely chaotic. We don't know if it's doing great or if it's doing bad, but I'll tell you one thing that is the biggest no-brainer going on right now. It's gold. Gold and precious metals. Gold is up 25% year to date, over $3,300 an ounce. Goldman Sachs thinks it could go to $3,700 an ounce this year, and I would not be surprised if it does. It is just a remarkable rise in gold. If you look at it year over year, it was about 2,400 at this time last year. If you look at a 5-year margin, it's almost doubled. If you bought gold years ago, you would have made a fortune. And I've got great partners in the gold industry, Priority Gold. You go to prioritygold.com/freedom, or you text SNC as in Salem News Channel, SNC, and you connect with them and they will get you the number is 24999. Text SNC to 24999, or you go to prioritygold.com/freedom. They got a free wealth preservation guide. They got a free gold and silver guide. They'll get in touch with you, answer your questions, and get you into the gold game. And it's the place to be. It is the safest bet. It's a hedge against everything. And with Trump's policies, you might also see silver rising. So there's other precious metals, IRAs, 401ks. You can get involved tax and penalty free. Great way to protect your wealth. And at this rate, you're probably going to grow it quite a bit as well. So again, SNC to 24999, or go to prioritygold.com/freedom. Okay. LA fires, the rebuilding process continues to go slow. Rick Caruso's calling out that only 31 rebuilding permits have been approved in LA. This is sadly predictable. The Democrats who run this city and this county are not just all of a sudden going to become talented and qualified and competent overnight. We knew that to be the case. We could have predicted it to be the case. And and sadly, it's turning out exactly as we anticipated. So hopefully the Trump administration will get into gear and help out. And then when California and LA have chances to elect competent people, we do so instead of just electing familiar woke people. A couple of Hollywood items. John Nolte's written up for us. AMC Theaters losing $202 million. I guess this was in the last quarter, so the first quarter. Let's see, massive numbers. Bad movies. Movies are not good enough. I've been watching a couple movies. I've been freeing up a little bit of my schedule. I like movies when I have the time. They're just not as good as they used to be. They're just not. So even though we've all the skills to make them, we don't have the vision anymore. And they're not captivating the culture's imagination at a high level. So movie theaters are, I'm not rooting for this. I'm actually rooting against it. I wish we could have a revival of American movies and worthy of a longer discussion at a different time, but not going well. And in the meantime, you've got the groomers at Disney opening up a theme park in the United Arab Emirates, a place where homosexuality is a crime. So they want to groom your kids with all the trans content and all of the forced gay plot lines and Toy Story spinoffs and the men with periods in the Baymax show. But then you've got a theme park they want to open up and get all that money from people in totalitarian oppressive regimes where homosexuality is listed as a crime. So there you go. That's the hypocrisy there, because they need to make money. And Bob Iger's got to make money before he passes off the reins in a few years. Which he will. All right. That'll be today's show. Thanks to producer Misty. Misty has pulled some great Lori Lightfoot footage from me. Misty, keep that. I'm going to use that, but I didn't get around to it. We got some Jasmine Crockett we can get to. Look, it's busy stuff. It's a busy week, and that's great. Breitbart.com all weekend long for breaking news. Thanks to all of you in the audience for telling 10,000 friends and family members and supporting our terrific advertisers. That helps out a lot as well. And I'll talk to you next time.